in action scheduled for 10 rounds of boxing. Introducing to you first on my left, fighting out of the red corner, he enters the ring wearing blue trunks with white trim and hailing from Grand Rapids, Michigan in the United States. He weighed in at 221 3/4 pounds, and his unbeaten record includes 13 wins, no losses, 1 no contest, with 3 wins coming by way of knockout. He is ranked number 10 heavyweight contender in the world by the IBF, introducing the USBA heavyweight champion, the undefeated Buster Mathis Jr. And his opponent across the ring, on my right, fighting out of the blue corner in this 10-round non-title main event. He is wearing black trunks with gold trim and fighting out of Houston, Texas in the United States. With a record of 14 wins and only 1 loss, he has 10 wins coming by way of knockout, and he weighed in at 228 1/4 pounds, introducing the fighter known as Dangerous, Sherman Bernard Griffin. Once again, introducing to you...
Take a look at the tail of the tape. You take a look at Sherman Griffin at 31 years of age. He'll not only be the older, the taller, the heavier, but also the reach advantage. But one thing about Buster Mathis is that he will negate any kind of reach advantage you might have. He'll work off the chest of Sherman Griffin if he can get inside, and that'll be his game plan today, trying to keep his record unblemished at 13-0. Sam Smith along with John Saraceno as we welcome you to the heavyweight explosion, and this being our main event, the heavyweights. On the right in the blue, Buster Mathis Jr. against Sherman Griffin out of St. Louis, Missouri. Buster fighting out of Grand Rapids, Michigan. They've come a long way to fight, though, here in Tokyo, Japan. Buster 13-0, despite the fact that he lost in a fight to the bounty hunter. And then a hunter, of course, testing positive for drugs, so it was ruled a no contest, even though it was a loss to Mathis, not officially on his record. This is not a title fight, and now Buster gets staggered with a pretty good left hand by Sherman Griffin.
And Buster's in immediate trouble, Sam. Back up against the ropes. He better either start punching back or get off the ropes.
Well, the thing he needs to do is he's down. So Sherman Griffin has down Buster Mathis.
A clubbing right hand. And he was staggered earlier, so I'm not so sure that Buster didn't have all his senses when he got hit with that shot.
This, by the way, is a non-title fight, but if Buster Mathis does lose this fight, the USBA title would be ruled as vacant. Big, tough right hands thrown by Sherman Griffin on the inside, and Buster still hasn't got his legs under it.
In case some folks wonder about Sherman Griffin, if that name sounds familiar, he beat Evander Holyfield at the Golden Gloves in 1984 before the Olympics, but then lost to Holyfield at the Olympic trials, did not make the Olympic team. Of course, Evander Holyfield went on to become cruiserweight and then heavyweight champion.
Actually, Griffin had gone on to win the USBA cruiserweight title by defeating a future champion in Jeff Lampkin, but then had some run-ins with the law, went to prison, and was out for more than 3 years, and is now making a comeback at the age of 31.
Buster's starting to punch back here in the first round, and not any time too late, Sam. He's in a lot of trouble here. Big first round for Sherman Griffin.
Well, a big first round for Buster Mathis, too, because it has just been announced that he will fight. Of course, Reddick Bowe coming on June 11 on an HBO title fight there, or at least a championship caliber fight. And now here he is in trouble in the first round, being down once by Sherman Griffin.
You got to wonder if that served as any distraction for Buster coming into this fight, knowing that the negotiations for that fight were ongoing. But at this point, the biggest distraction is the right hand of Sherman Griffin.
Boy, Sherman has really looked sharp in round one. Now Buster is definitely fighting back to end the round, and even Sherman staggers a little bit here.
Sherman got shook up with that right hand. There's a left hook by Buster, one of his favorite punches, landed solidly to the chin. Great first round.
Title fight as the USBA champion. In the blue, Buster Mathis Jr. comes out fighting and throws a pretty good left hand on Sherman Griffin. But again, Mathis down in round 1. And he's come back with a vengeance here in the second round.
And we see Griffin pumping that jab out. We saw in the Tyrell Biggs fight with Sherman, Buster Mathis, that Buster has a hard time getting past the jab. If you keep it in his face, it keeps him off your chest, and you've got to do that. And that's got to be a large part of the blueprint for victory for Sherman Griffin tonight here in Tokyo.
If the name Buster Mathis sounds familiar to boxing fans, it should. His father was a great contender back in the 60s. He fought a lot of the top fighters, including Muhammad Ali, Joe Frazier, George Chuvalo, along with Jerry Quarry. Again, a contender in the 60s, and now trains Buster. Buster Sr. has some very poor health, Albert, and is not able to travel with his son around the world. So I know he's viewing our fights tonight here from Tokyo, and we wish him the very best of health. Right now, I'm sure he's sending out the best of health to his son, John, because he has looked like he's recovered pretty well, but that was a shaky first round by the USBA champion. He was definitely back, though.
I'll tell you what's interesting, Sam, is that Sherman Griffin, after he got stunned near the end of the first round, he seems to have a little bit more respect for Buster Mathis. You see him retreating a little bit more, working behind his jab, being a little bit more cautious.
There's that good combination. Buster will do that. And one of the things you'll notice as this fight proceeds, if it goes longer, you'll start to hear Buster Mathis making more noise on his punches. He really will kind of make a grunting sound on every punch. Right now he's not doing so. You know when he's in the groove when you start hearing grunt with the punches, and we'll hear that later on in the fight.
It's kind of like Jimmy Connors with boxing gloves on.
Or Monica Seles, who drove me right up the wall with that grunting in her tennis matches, but it worked for her, and it works for Buster Mathis.
Sometimes you need that extra oomph.
Yeah.
Expel all the demons from within.
You can already start to hear him kind of expel some air every time he throws a punch. And I tell you what, Buster has definitely come back in this second round. This is a nice return for Buster Mathis.
Good recovery for Buster in this round. He's working the jab. He's really putting the pressure on Sherman.
You know, we alluded to the fact that Sherman Griffin, that excellent amateur career, Buster really didn't have that long an amateur career. 20-5 with 6 knockouts, not known as a knockout puncher. But however, he was a 5-time Michigan Golden Glove champion. Said he tried a lot of other sports. He said, I was pretty bad. Not bad as in good. He said, I was bad. So he turned to boxing, much to the chagrin of his father, who really didn't want him to go into boxing, but the rest is history, with his father now training him through round number 2 of this fight tonight in Tokyo.
Buster that second round 10-9, but still have him trailing, Sam, because of the knockdown he suffered in the first round.
Did you rule it a 10-8 for sure in the first round?
Yes.
There, John? Okay. So Buster Mathis again down in round 1. Buster, the USBA champion, as we open the bell for round 3, coming back strong in the second round and now punching his way into contention in the third round.
You made a reference to Buster's amateur career. He did not have that many fights. He's still learning how the professional game. He really is. There's some things he needs to work on. He's not the most powerful puncher, but he's got quick, active hands that will keep him in a lot of fights.
Good clubbing left hand that time by Buster. And that's one of his weapons, John, is the fact that this is where he likes to be. This is his office right here. But, boy, he'll unleash that left hand, and he's got a pretty good left hook.
Now, Sherman Griffin does not need to be fighting on the inside here with Buster Mathis. I mean, it's not what he did in the first round. It's not what he really did in the second round either. And I think he's going to get the worst of this kind of a strategy. Now, Buster does not have the greatest jab in the world. He kind of paused with his jab. I think I'd want him on the outside, trying to lunge in and then catching him with right hands.
You know, Sherman Griffin had a 13-1 record. Only loss coming to Everett Bigfoot Martin back in 1985 when he lost a 6-rounder in the early part of his career. Actually, in 87, had gone with a couple of good bouts. He beat Bobby Crabtree, knocked him out in 4 rounds, and then went 11 with Jesse Shelby for the Texas title in the cruiserweight division. And everybody thought he was really going to be one of the real premier fighters, but then, as we alluded to, some personal problems, went to prison, and now making a comeback at the age of 31.
Not the easiest thing to do in professional boxing was that long layoff. You mentioned before he had some problems and he spent some time in prison, to come back and try to fight at a high level.
By the way, that knockdown of Mathis back in the first round, it would not be unusual to see an opponent go down. Of the 13 knockouts, interesting enough, Sherman has won 13 fights, and all of his wins have been by knockout. And the only time that the fighters have gone by, he had 3 knockouts in the first, 1 in the second, and 1 in the third. So he is an early starter. And with Mathis going down early, that would have been almost the way that he's put a lot of the fighters down. But Mathis is able to recover, and he definitely is back in control of this fight again.
This third round has turned into a real body attack for both fighters, but Buster's getting the best of it. And I really don't understand Griffin's strategy here, except unless he wants to conserve a little energy for the later rounds.
Yeah, you'd have to probably figure maybe Griffin might have punched himself out a little bit and trying to rest, because he did have an active first round, that's for sure.
Another thing you see with fighters as they begin getting older and their legs go a little soft is they use the ropes a lot just to help support themselves.
Many financial experts believe the U.S. recession is over, and 1994 will be a recovery.
Welcome to the Toronto Extra Heavyweight Explosion from Tokyo, Japan. This is round 4 as Buster Mathis Jr. battles against Sherman Griffin. Buster getting up off the canvas in round 1. They come back and take pretty good control in the second and third round. Sam Smith along with John Saraceno, glad you could join us on our heavyweight explosion, bringing you Buster Mathis, who again has just been announced to fight Reddick Bowe June 11th. So this is a major fight for him against Sherman Griffin.
That will be a major step up in class for Buster. Reddick Bowe, I think, when he's trained properly and motivated, still the best heavyweight in the world. Of course, Evander Holyfield wanted it more in the rematch, took back his title.
Sherman Griffin trying to battle back, but Buster has started to get the accumulation of punches in on the 31-year-old Griffin.
Also, I don't like what I see with Griffin's legs. He looks a bit unsteady, and I think that's why we saw him go to the ropes early, Sam, in the third round.
You know, Buster not only proud of that 13-0 professional record, he's also most appreciative of his education. He's already graduated from a 2-year community college and now attends Grand Valley State College, where he's studying computer science. So not only working to improve his boxing skills and maybe make a little coin, but also looking out for his future down the road. Nice to see from a very nice young man. Griffin trying to exchange with Buster Mathis here in round 4.
And you saw Sherman make a nice move there. He was against the ropes. He spun out and turned, got Mathis against the rope, followed up with a nice combination.
By the way, for you folks that are continually trying to lose weight, let me give you a little heart here if I could. Buster Mathis on the right still has a little pudgy look about him at 221 3/4, but keep in mind he once weighed 305 pounds. Wow. He lost half himself.
You know, we tend to make fun of guys who are overweight, and I know I've done that many times myself.
Look at him come on here, John. Really pounding away on Griffin.
But the Mathis family has really battled a serious weight problem from his father, his uncles, and Buster Jr. himself. His father, Buster Mathis, of course, a heavyweight contender in the 60s. At one time ballooned over 500 pounds after his ring career.
Oh my.
And has some serious health problems. We send our best wishes to Buster Sr. in Michigan.
You see Buster Mathis trying to take the measure here of Sherman Griffin. Buster down in the first round, recovering here in the fourth, and has fought very well in the last 3 rounds.
Just teeing off on Griffin at the end of that round.
Round 5 in our heavyweight explosion. La Cerveza Maspina, Corona Extra, bringing you the international fights tonight from Tokyo, Japan. Buster Mathis on the right in the blue. Sherman Griffin now fighting out of Texas, even though he still resides in St. Louis, Missouri. Tough street kid when he came out of the amateur ranks. Good, solid amateur background, as John pointed out. Actually defeated the current world champion, Evander Holyfield, back in '84. Thought he was cruising into the Olympic Games, but Holyfield beat him in the trials. Knocked him out of a chance to go to the Olympic Games.
I think I can hear Buster Sr. back home in Michigan telling his son, move your head a little bit. Even though he's not getting hit, because Sherman's not firing back to the head. Buster has a bad habit of not moving his head at times. And against a fighter like Riddick Bowe, if he fights him in June, you know, when that fight comes off, that could be lethal.
You know, Buster stands 6'6". Riddick Bowe is what, 6'5", 6'4.5"?
6'5".
Yeah. So you're talking about a sculpture-type looking fighter that Buster will be fighting on June the 11th. He'll be fighting uphill, and he's got to get inside on Riddick Bowe to try to smother any punches he throws, because he stays outside and tries to punch with him. That could be a long, long day, or maybe a short day for Buster Mathis.
Buster just has his head glued to Sherman Griffin's chest and head, not giving Griffin any punching room.
Slowly but surely, you're starting to hear more and more coming out of Buster Mathis, and this is what you'll hear in the latter part of the fight. He'll start to make more sound on those punches, and when he starts doing that, he's in his groove.
You know, when Griffin throws his jab, he's really got a better chance of beating Buster, and I just got to believe it's his legs and perhaps his conditioning why he's laying against the ropes as much as he is, because that's the wrong way to fight Buster Mathis Jr.
Punch, jab, move. He's not been able to do that since the early rounds, mostly because of Buster's kind of clinging style, as you pointed out, kind of just gluing his head right on his shoulders.
But he's allowing him to do that. Yep. And as a fighter, you can't allow the other man to impose his will on you. You have to take control with your own style and fight the fight that will give the other man problems. He's not doing that.
We'll be halfway through this fight here as we reach the end of round number 5. Again, an important fight for Buster Mathis Jr., a non-title fight, but should he lose today, he would be stripped of the title, or at least the title would be vacated. The USBA heavyweight title would be ruled as vacant. And with Mathis set to fight Riddick Bowe, it would be quite a downer, but he has really recovered it after going down in round 1 against Sherman Griffin as we finish round 5. With that huge rump, hips, and legs, that's where his real power is when he starts setting down on it. Good uppercut inside on Sherman Griffin again. You know, Buster's shown a good arsenal of punches. He's hooked, he's come with straight right and lefts, and also he's come with an uppercut on Griffin when he gets in on his chest.
He loves that left hook, and he's coming with it now.
He's got him in trouble on the ropes again. Sherman Griffin fought last in February. Carl McGrew went down in 6 rounds with a decision. Again, I had alluded to winning all of his fights by knockout. Excuse me, that was an error. He won that one by decision. He won 12 others by knockout. So he's trying to come back, but again, very few fights since his prison stint. Fought only once in 1990, and now has come back here in the latter stage of 93 and 94 and put some pretty good fights together. He's won 4 since coming back. And Mathis is trying to end that string right now.
Good left hook to the body by Griffin, and that's what he needs to do to try and slow Buster down. Go to the body a little bit more. Nice uppercut.
You know, Buster Mathis, when he steps up against Riddick Bowe, will be making a step, but then you consider that he has defeated some relatively good heavyweights on his way up. I mean, guys that'll test you. We mentioned Mark Young, the journeyman out of Charlotte, which stayed right on his chest. Mike Dixon, Carl Williams, also Levi Phillips, who he defeated over in South Africa. I thought that was a pretty much of a major win in the fact that Phillips had been in with some pretty good people himself.
Those are all seasoned fighters, Sam, you're right. And conversely, Sherman Griffin, although he had a much more extensive amateur career than Buster Mathis Jr. did, as a professional, hasn't really had the kind of competition. Jeff Lampkin, probably the best fighter he ever fought, and that was at cruiserweight back in 1987. He's also fought Everett Martin back in '85, and Everett's been in with all the heavyweights.
Martin, the only man to defeat him. He lost that decision in 6, did Sherman Griffin. There's that good action again by Buster Mathis Jr. You know, I asked him one time, I said, do you mind being called Buster Mathis Jr., or do you just want to be referred to Buster Mathis? And he said, hey, I'm proud to be the son of a great, great contender and a guy I certainly have a lot of respect and admiration for. I don't mind being called Junior at all when you consider the man that's my father. nice tribute to his dad.
And you know, Joe Frazier, Muhammad Ali, and Jerry Quarry also had a little bit of respect for Buster Mathis.
And you know, just about to the man, they all came back for a special tribute and a benefit dinner to help him defray some of his medical cost in Grand Rapids, kind of showing the respect that all of those guys showed for one another back in the 60s. Well, a pretty good finish to a round number 6. And again, a tiring Sherman Griffin. One of the things you always want to try to do is to keep those arms off the rope. As you see, he is slumping a little bit there, just trying to keep himself cooled down. Rather warm in the arena tonight here in Tokyo.
Sherman providing us with some of that live corner noises, should we call it?
Let's take a look at the busy Buster Mathis Jr. Look how he just walks in on his chest, John. Just gets right under all of those, that reach that he had, and there's that uppercut.
It just jolted his neck back. And when you're in punching range, right there, Sherman Griffin is within range of being hit. You got to be punching. Otherwise, you're going to get hit.
Welcome to the Cedric Kushner Sports Network and Corona Extra's heavyweight explosion from Tokyo, Japan, as Buster Mathis battles on with Sherman Griffin. Sam Smith along with John Saraceno, the boxing writer for the USA Today, joining us on our fights. And John, nice to be back with you again. We haven't seen each other since Dusseldorf, Germany, that we enjoyed Henry Masker with a big fight there, but it's nice to have you back in our heavyweight explosion.
Yeah, we see Sherman Griffin slowly wearing down physically in this fight, Sam, and Buster imposing his will. Now, Griffin wants to be in the center of the ring, except for he doesn't want to be that close. He wants to be jabbing, stepping to the side, then hitting Buster with right hands when he moves in, but you got to question his conditioning, because he's not doing what he did in the first 2 rounds, certainly. I mean, Buster's like a bull in there.
Yeah.
If he had a set of horns on his head, he'd be one dangerous dude, let me tell you. Wow.
You know, there might be some concern for Sherman Griffin. He might want to change to blue gloves. He does have the bull coming right at those red gloves. And look at Buster come on.
Wild right hand followed up with a left. I think if Buster just stayed to the body at this point and continued to break down Sherman Griffin, you know, he might be able to connect with some of those right hands and left hooks to the head, maybe stop him, possibly.
It is interesting, by the way, to note that on some of our earlier fights here in Tokyo, Japan, that some of the scoring has been, shall we say, a little bit questionable. So if it does go to the cards, it'll be interesting to find out how they score this fight if it does go the full 10 rounds. Buster Mathis Jr. trying to pick up another win, maintain control of his title, even though it's not at stake. If he were to lose this fight, the USBA heavyweight title would be ruled as vacant, and certainly would take a lot of steam out of his projected fight with Riddick Bowe and June.
If Sherman Griffin has a right uppercut, I would suggest he use it right here. The way Buster's leaning in at times, his head's unprotected. But when you have a guy firing punches at you like this, and you're just standing in the corner, you're not going to score a lot of points, and you're going to be the target rather than making your opponent the bullseye. But Griffin has chosen to fight this fight at close quarters.
Buster now with a pretty good cut right on the bridge of the nose.
And he backed off, and Sherman realizes it. Now he's coming on. He's had some problem with that nose, hasn't he?
He's had a lot of problems. Yeah, it's been broken several times.
Oh, dangerous punch to throw, that uppercut from the outside.
10 rounder in our heavyweight explosion. Buster Mathis, I'm sure he knows they're fighting 10 rounds. He wanted to touch up gloves here at the start of the 8th round. A little sportsmanship, but we're not quite ready for that yet, Buster.
According to our scorecards, Sherman's going to need to stop or knock out Buster Mathis to win this fight. Now, that's our scorecard, because we've seen some very questionable scoring in earlier bouts that makes you wonder what the judges from Japan are scoring.
Yet in an earlier fight today, it was opportunity for Terrell Biggs to get back in the ring and look for a victory, but Ray Ennis looked extremely sharp in 3 knockdowns in the 3rd round of Terrell Biggs to win one of our main event of the night, and Buster Mathis is trying to win one here. Sherman Griffin may have a different idea, but right now he's not doing enough to steal it back away, I don't think.
We've seen Buster being a little bit more cautious and staying on the outside, maybe taking a little bit of a blow here in the 8th round. He threw a nice sizzling combination there a few moments ago, but preferring to work on the outside, giving Sherman a little bit different look.
You know, Buster trains in what is called the Pride Boxing Gym up in Grand Rapids. They have several outstanding young fighters there, trying to develop a pretty good little stable with Buster Mathis Sr. along with Brian Lee and Bruce Kelty. But this is definitely the pride of the stable right now. Buster Mathis Jr., good hard worker. He's come to Japan, put that work ethic right to work. He had to, coming off the canvas in round 1.
You see Buster pawing at his nose. That cut may be bothering him a little bit more than we suspect, especially the fact that he's backed off here in the 8th round and he's not fighting on the inside. Yeah, I guess it hurts when you get hit on the nose.
Absolutely.
Right?
But Sherman Griffin is not taking much advantage of it. You know,
no, he's not.
This is really where he needs to be. This was going to be his style, kind of punching, boxing outside. Look at him. He's walking around not throwing any punches.
He doesn't have much left in the tank, Sam, and he's not going to win a fight doing this, and you can see his legs are going on him.
Yeah, that little dancing around is the first sign of the fighters just trying to say, okay, come on, legs.
Trying to keep him alive.
Yeah,
exactly.
trying to say, okay, come on now.
Don't leave me now.
It's almost to the point the heart is willing, but the body has said no.
And I think that's what we're seeing right now with Griffin. It's the fatigue factor setting in.
John, you've seen...
He doesn't even look like he wants to fight at this point. The referee could almost stop this.
He could.
Because he's almost turned his back and his shoulders on Buster at that point. If Buster would step up a tempo here and put some kind of a flurry, he might be able to get a stoppage out of this fight and go.
Knockouts in his pro career as he ends the 8th round. He answers the bell for round 9 as Buster Mathis coming off the stool a little bit late. You see him dancing away from the charging Griffin, who came over in a hurry but didn't do anything with it. Now you're starting to hear a little bit more sounds coming out of Buster Mathis here.
Interesting. Griffin threw one jab, and Buster said, not today, and threw a 4-5 punch combination, got Griffin right off him.
This is an unusual style for Buster Mathis, to be honest with you. I've done a lot of his fights, but he's kind of outside and trying to box a little bit here. This is the Buster Mathis I've seen.
Good hand speed. Excellent hand speed for a heavyweight.
And he knows where he is on the card, regardless of what the scoring has been earlier. And he also knows that Sherman Griffin, tired as he may be, also put him down in round 1.
That's right.
Well, the inevitable question has to come. John Saraceno from the USA Today boxing column, ready to go. And Buster Mathis, that's a tough step up for Buster Mathis.
If we were talking about horse racing, we would be talking about Buster going from a $10,000 claiming race to a $1 million stakes race. I mean, he is stepping up in class to that level, and he's going to need some luck that night to beat Riddick Bowe. There's no question about it. He's going to be a sizable underdog. On the other hand, who knows? Maybe Riddick Bowe doesn't take Buster that seriously, sees what we see, and figures, I can handle this guy. He's not a big puncher. He's open to be hit. And a lot of times that's a fighter's downfall. But you know one thing, Buster Mathis Jr. is going to give his all that night, and Riddick Bowe's going to know that he was in a fight. Kid's got a lot of heart.
He's got a huge heart. And he's got a work ethic. He'll be ready. And I think you made a great point, John, early on. I really believe that Buster came out of the locker room literally not ready. Circumstances of the timing coming into the ring, and just really got clocked by Sherman Griffin early on in the fight. But he has made a marvelous recovery and really fighting an unusual Buster Mathis fight. And in fact, he'll go in and throw those flurry of punches, as you see, then back out. Not the usual stay on your chest Buster Mathis, but a very smart fight tonight.
I think you're right, Sam. I think he realizes that he's got the fight totally in control. I'm sure the corner has advised him of that he's way ahead. Don't get caught with any silly punches. And I think the nose thing is bothering him, too. That's really when he backed off, when that nose busted wide open. And also, he's got a big fight coming up against Bowe now. I mean, why take silly chances?
Well, he also knows that with the cut, that he can be cut again.
Right.
And he doesn't want to, the way he fights, he doesn't want to take the chance of getting a headbutt and getting another cut. And obviously walking into a big punch and maybe even taking the chance to lose. But I tell you what, he's working to the end of round 9. Well, the sushi crowd here in Tokyo, Japan gets ready to watch the 10th and final round. Main event of our heavyweight explosion. On the ride in the light blue, Buster Mathis Jr. Sherman Griffin, fighting out of the Texas area, even though he lives in St. Louis, Missouri. 31-year-old journeyman. Great early career. Problems in his personal life, going to prison, out of the ring for 3 years. Putting together 4 straight wins on his comeback, but tonight it may come to a close after a quick start. It's a rather slow finish for Sherman Griffin.
Threw a nice little left hook a few moments ago there, and I haven't seen him do that much of the fight, Griffin. Compact left hook, but didn't follow up on it.
By the way, a little credit where credit is due. Ken Morita has been our referee, a Japanese amateur referee who has stepped in and referees a lot of the pro fights here, lightweights as they might be. He's in there with the heavyweights here tonight and basically has kind of stayed out of the way, and that's a good sign of a good referee.
You notice how he's let them grapple on the inside, kind of work themselves out of a lot of clinches. I wonder if he's ever done any sumo wrestling.
Probably has seen a few in his life.
And he's used to breaking up bigger guys in this.
That's probably right.
These guys are small compared to those guys.
By the way, in Japan, one of the things you want to watch out for are the bouncers at some of the clubs. They are former sumo wrestlers. You don't want to tangle with those guys.
I'm glad you advised me of that.
Thank you very much. Halfway through the final round of our main event tonight. You know, the crowd is warmed to the task here tonight. I think they've gotten into this fight pretty well.
I think they've enjoyed the last couple heavyweight fights they've seen. There's been a lot of good action. You've seen guys hit the deck. And that's, let's face it, that's what people want in heavyweights. They want to see big punches. Sherman just got to let it all hang out now, as they used to say. But he's arm weary. Yeah, you can see it. There's no steam on his punches, Sam.
He's trying no snap there right now.
Truth be told, he's in bigger danger of getting knocked out than Buster is at this point.
Buster Mathis Jr. again trying to pick up another win, which would be his 14th win on his column for the wins. He actually lost to Mike the Bounty Hunter in Corpus Christi, Texas in December of '93 for the USBA title. Hunter retaining the title that night, but then testing positive for drugs after the fight was Hunter, and the fight itself was ruled as a no contest, thus taking the loss off the record of Buster Mathis, just to set the record straight for you. Buster still, that kind of sticks in his craw. He really took that loss very, very heavily. But he was outboxed. Mike the Bounty Hunter, despite his personal problems out of the ring, is a very good fighter as they fight to the end of this one here tonight. And you can hear the appreciative crowd here in Tokyo, Japan, as they have watched the heavyweights in our heavyweight explosion fight to the end. And Sherman Griffin literally staggering around the rim. The ring trying to find his corner once again.
He ought to be trying to find a stool right now to sit on.
Buster Mathis, not your svelte-looking heavyweight by any stretch, but again, keep in mind at 305 pounds once in his career. Malcolm Garrett, by the way, also working out of that corner, the director of boxing for Cedric Kushner out of New York City. Sag Harbor, Long Island, to be exact.
I thought I saw a familiar face in the camera pan there.
By the way, Malcolm, I don't know if he knows where his home is in Indiana right now. He has been on the road to South Africa, to Germany, to Japan. I'm not really know. As a matter of fact, he knows where his hotel room is and his traveling bag. But outside of that, I'm not really sure.
I would like to have his frequent flyer account and yours, Sam.
That's right. Well, yeah, we've had a few miles, you and I both, as a matter of fact. Buster Mathis, again, we've alluded to the fact that he will retain his USBA title. Not that this was a title fight. It had to go 12 rounds, and, of course, designated by the USBA to be a title fight. It was not. But he stuck a chance of losing that title. If he had lost, they would have ruled the title vacant and also would have done in his chances of going in with momentum against Reddick Bowe on June the 11th. Jimmy Lennon Jr. is just about ready for the announcement of the decision.
Ladies and gentlemen, after 10 rounds of boxing, we have a majority decision, and here are the score totals. The referee in charge, Ken Morita, scores about 95 to 95, even a draw. Overruled scores it 97-94. Nakamori scores it 97-95 in favor of the winner, Buster Mathis Jr.
Well, John, you and I both alluded to the fact that we have seen some early judging questions, and I think a majority decision here, particularly the way Mathis had taken control. Truly was down in the first round that kind of got Griffin on the board early, but truly a solid fight for Mathis, and to get a majority decision is rather unusual here.
Judge Morita's 95-95 score is simply outrageous. That man should never be allowed to judge professional fighting again. You mentioned that the referee was an amateur referee in the past. I'm starting to wonder if these judges weren't amateurs. I had the fight 98-91. I think you scored it similarly.
Yeah, sure did.
I didn't even think the fight was close. I think, as you said before, Buster was in complete control. He did have that rough first round, and I gave Griffin a 10-8 round there, but the rest of the way it was a clear-cut decision. I don't even understand the 97, 95, 97, 94 scores.
Buster Mathis rated as high as number 10 by the IBF and the USBA champion.